I hope everyone's good. I know it's the afternoon. Thank you for the energy. I'm going to be talking about rice. Very little is known about African indigenous rice varieties, and so I really wanted to focus on that. We're going to start off with a video, and from there we will delve into it. So there's about two types of rice in the world. One is the Asian variety, and there are African varieties of rice as well. What you will see now in most of the world is a lot of the Asian rice is being cultivated, but the African rice has a beautiful history and story. A lot of rice from West Africa actually ended up in the US, and it's the mother of what is now Carolina rice, which actually helped develop the entire city in South Carolina called Charleston. So what you see, this is a rice field in northern Senegal. It's owned by a smallhold farmer, so his family has about 9 hectares of land that they're cultivating. And I found them as I was driving, looking to understand what the situation with rice is. And as you can see, there are lots of birds flying around. And the land is vast, and most of the rice cultivation is done manually by hand. And as I approached the rice field, I saw this young man walking through the field with an empty jerry can or oil can. And he was just banging and banging and banging on the drum and making noise. So I followed him, and I started asking him what he was doing. He said that he was spending the day shooing away the birds. And so I asked him, how long are you going to continue to do this? He said, well, the rice will be ready in 3 weeks. So he's going to have to be in the fields shooing away the birds from the rice for the next 3 weeks to make sure that they don't lose a lot of harvest due to the birds. So that's how I started really understanding some of the challenges and complexities about rice. So we'll hear a little bit more about jollof, but jollof is a dish that comes from West Africa, and right now there's a lot of conversations about this rice, and so I wanted to delve into that. So I was born in Ghana, and my family moved to the US when I was young, and being one of the only Africans in my school, my sister and I used to get a lot of questions asked of us. People were always asking us lots of different things, but one of the questions I remember getting asked quite a lot was, what did you eat when you were in Ghana? And I would tell them about the beautiful cuisines that we would have. I told them about some of the dishes that we would make from plantain, like kelewele, which is a dish of ripe plantain cut into small pieces with spices, local spices and ginger and chili, and it's fried until it's nice and crispy on the outside but still warm inside. There are dishes like tatali, other ones like kaklo, all made from plantain. From cassava, we had fufu, yake, gari, all of which I would tell them about. So imagine my shock when I came back to Ghana 30 years later to find everybody eating rice. I was a little confused because we had such a very diverse diet, but all of a sudden everything had become Riceified. Riceified is a word I've come up with, which just basically talks about how rice has taken over and people are eating for convenience. And I was confused because when we talk about foodways are the ways in which economic, social, and political practices lead us to understand how we consume and use food. So for rice, for example, at a national level, Ghana has natural rice areas in the northern part of the country, as well as in the Volta region, which don't need irrigation, but we also have rice fields in the south. And the rice fields in the south are actually irrigation, and that was done through Ghana's relationship with Russia and China at a certain moment in time in our history. I knew that traditionally we only ate rice for holidays and special occasions like birthdays, so I couldn't quite understand why rice was still such a major player. I knew that it had to be dried, and then because it would require processing, sometimes they would parboil the rice so that it wouldn't break while it was being processed. And I soon realized that because rice was not readily available and it was quite expensive, we ate it only for special occasions. But why is everybody eating rice? I kept asking. So these are some of the dishes that I started seeing all over town, jollof rice being the main one. And I started asking questions. It turns out that in the early 80s, Ghana had to go through an IMF and World Bank restructuring. And while this restructuring was going on, it allowed for liberalization of the economy, which meant cheap imports were being flooded into the country. And those cheap imports that were being flooded the market meant that a lot of other foods became less desirous. But it also meant that the local rice farmers could not compete with this. And the US actually had campaigns where they brought in aprons, they brought in assistance to provide to the street food vendors so that they would promote this rice that they had flooded the market with. So it wasn't really a fair fight. I started thinking, how do we change this? How do we change the way people eat? And I came up with a 3-step plan. The first one was to do research to understand what the bottlenecks were. The second was to create demand, to make people want to eat rice. And then the third was to create a space where we could produce rice. So I started collaborating with a few friends. We started traveling to understand, as you saw, in Ghana, we used these catapults with stones to actually pick off the birds. So that was one part of the problem that we saw. We also realized that the rice that we had was Asian rice. It was not African rice. It turns out that Asian rice has a higher yield, so the government was doing research and having this rice available for local farmers. And so the local farmers did not even have access to rice seeds from Africa. So I joined together with a friend of mine, and we contacted the seed bank in Norway and managed to get these seeds brought. So for the first time, we're growing indigenous African strains of rice in Africa, and we're still testing it out to see how well they're doing, which varieties will work, which varieties taste good, so that we can start understanding how to put it back into the market. We started looking at creating demand. We created a park. This is a children's park, and together with an architect, Mei Ling Loco, we built actually in a flood zone in this park and planted rice so that children could see what it takes to grow rice, so the labor involved in rice would become more evident and clear for everybody. I also collaborate with an artist. So this is a cartoon that's done by a collaborator, friend of mine, Bright Akuya. And jollof is a dish that originated from Senegal, Gambia, and migrated through West Africa. So currently, there's something called the Jollof Wars, where Ghana and Nigeria mostly are fighting about this rice. Who does it belong to, and whose tastes better? And so we wanted to really highlight the battle and the struggle, because the rice is actually from Asia, the chicken is coming from Asia, but the president of Ghana in front, the Nigerian president, who at the time was sick, is holding his IV. And we had the president of Senegal fighting over this one plate of rice. But in reality, who's winning? China, because the rice and the chicken is coming from China. So he's walking away with the continent. So this is something that he came up with after our conversations. So it's important to look at, when we're talking about food and food systems change, sustainability, biodiversity, how do we collaborate with people across and beyond the food space? He went on to do this other image. And this one is actually, again, Ghana trying to be the winner. On the plate, you will see a lot of flags. The flags represent the countries where the ingredients come from. So we're talking about a national dish that Ghana is trying to win. However, the rice is coming from China, the chicken coming from Brazil, the Netherlands bringing in some of the carrots. We've got salad cream from the UK. And, well, we have some people fighting in the background, so you'll understand, depending on when he did the image, what was happening around the world at that time. So it's great to have images like this, which allows people to start thinking and questioning how and why they eat what they eat. We also started working on supporting the supply. Through the research that we did, we managed to find 2,000 female farmers that were growing rice in the Volta region. And these women don't have access to the African varieties. So we're currently doing work to see how best to provide these seeds to them, while also making sure that we have the market that would support them. So as of right now, they still require some additional equipment to be able to process and harvest all of this. But this is actually in Hohoe region, in Ghana's Volta region, and it's a beautiful space for the rice to grow. They have both low-lying rice, but they also have rice that grows in the highlands, in the hills. So that's it. I just would say that in terms of creating the change we want to see in the biodiversity, we need to make sure that we understand what the challenges are, what the problems are, as well as looking at creating a supply and demand. When people want something, that allows us to make that change. So I think it's just important for all of us to understand where we sit and how we can continue to contribute to that. Thank you.